We've all heard the jokes about meteorologists who get the forecast wrong. But what if I told you that the impact of an inaccurate forecast is much greater than we think, and there is a way to get it right more often than not? Bill Kirk is co-founder and CEO of Weather Trends International, and he joins us to talk about forecasting the weather and the impact it has on all these industries. That's all coming up right here, right now. I'm Sam Chen, and this is Face the Issues. Good evening and welcome to Face the Issues. I'm Sam Chen. All of us have heard or maybe even made the jokes about meteorologists keeping their jobs despite bad forecasts. And we all have complained about a game that gets rained out, or a picnic, or some kind of family reunion because we thought the weather would be good. But is the impact of a bad forecast much greater than that? How does it affect businesses and retail, farmers, agriculture, the finance field, and so forth? And is there a way to get those forecasts more accurate? Bill Kirk is the co-founder and CEO of Weather Trends International, an organization that has done just that, improved our ability to forecast the weather. He joins us tonight. Bill, welcome to Face the Issues. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having us.
It's so great to have you here, and I'm sure you've heard the jokes before.
80% wrong and you keep your job, right?
Exactly, right? It's one of the few things meteorologists, political forecasters, and sports analysts, right? I mean, it doesn't matter what you say on TV, you keep your job.
Right.
Let's just kind of start at that 30,000 foot level. When we talk about forecasts and meteorologists, weather maps, all those kind of things that we see, what's the basic idea of how forecasting works?
Yeah, so when I first went to meteorology school at Rutgers, 38 years ago, thought it was just, right, just stick your finger in the air and that's it. It's a lot of calculus, physics, it's fluid dynamics. So the atmosphere is a fluid and you try to predict that with physics.
Okay.
The problem is so the way a short range forecast works is you put all this data in around the world, plug it in your model, make a 10-minute forecast. 10-minute forecast goes back into your model, make a one-day forecast in your model, make a 10-day forecast.
Okay.
The problem is that rounding error explodes with time. Right? So the forecast accuracy degrades very quickly beyond a day or two or three or out 2 weeks. That's physics. So what we learned, we'll talk about later, but what we learned is just there's a better way. Math and statistics and cycles, El Nino's one that you're hearing about right now, right? These are cycles, is a better way than traditional physics because there's just too much error in trying to model the entire world to predict, 5 days from now.
So when we talk about meteorologists who get their forecasts wrong, it's really not necessarily the fault of the meteorologist per se. You're
it's
suggesting
just the limitation of the physics right now. So now even with satellite, the satellite era of having all this satellite interpolated data, satellite data is not that great, right? They can't tell us exactly what's happening in any given spot. So the physics is just, it works, the models works, but until you can count for literally every inch, the butterfly effect, right? Until you could account for every little nuance of a big, tall building, a small building, and get all that into your model globally, then you could have a perfect forecast.
Understood.
We're not anywhere near there.
And so the further you said earlier, when you're talking about 10 minutes out, it's going to be a lot more accurate than a day out, than 3 days out. So the further you go, the further you are away from
because this is a little rounding error, compounds, right? Math explodes with time. So your day one forecast has about 3-degree error. So whatever they're saying today is about off by 3 degrees on day one. By day 14, that's off by 7 to 12 degrees.
Sure.
Right?
And that could make a large difference.
Huge, yes.
Yeah. Let me ask you then about your organization. You talked about Weather Trends International. You guys say that you approach this whole forecasting business differently. What's the shift? I think when I first heard this, I thought, they hired better meteorologists. No. You're saying it's not even the meteorologist's issue. What's the shift at Weather Trends? How do you guys approach weather?
We do have meteorologists, right? So we have about 8 or 9 of those guys, but it's that they're good at something else, right? Meteorology, and they're great writers. Chrissy Klinger, meteorologists usually can't write. She can, and are great programmers. So ours is about statistics, and it's a trillion times a billion statistics a day. So it's a lot of math. It's 61 factorial, if you like math.
Okay.
So it's a lot of math to calculate the sensible weather a year out. So it's climate cycles. El Nino, you're hearing about it now. It's just an ocean pulse. It's an ocean gets warm, the ocean gets cold.
Okay.
Right? But I think God has given us 125 years of history to look back at and then to project the future. So that's how we use totally different approach than trying to physics modeling approach, because it doesn't work.
Help us understand the difference. You talked about cycles like El Nino. For the person who doesn't understand the weather beside if it's going to rain on their baseball game. What are cycles, and how is that approach different from what's being done?
Think about everything. The sun, right, goes through 11-year cycle, 22-year cycle, gets very active, gets weak, gets active. Right now it's going into a very strong 25th solar cycle phase. El Nino, La Nina. We came out of a 3-year La Nina, which is just the equatorial Pacific Ocean, got very cold. When that gets cold, we get drought in America. We get drought in South America. When it gets really warm, as it is right now, we tend to have floods. You know, you get wet, you get snowy, you get nor'easters, right? So if you understand how those cycles, and then there's many all over the world, right? How do they all interact together? Well, that's the key, right? So we start with statistics, and then we end with cycles to project, you know, long-term trends.
And the cycles, from what you're saying, it seems like they have patterns that they tend to follow. And to your point, over time,
well, they do and they don't. So here's the problem. NOAA's telling you it's going to be a really hot, dry, snowless winter. Wrong, because they're looking at El Nino, right? El Ninos of this magnitude ordinarily would mean that. But it's not a typical El Nino, right? We've already seen that it's not responding like a normal, strong El Nino would. Right, so, but they just say El Nino means this, and that's just not true. La Nina means, last year example, La Nina would have meant no snow in California. They typically have drought in La Nina. Cold Pacific, no moisture, no snow in California. They have the snowiest winter in record, right? So again, you got to be careful, just, you know, and everyone kind of, oh, it just means this. Well, it's a little more complicated than that.
So it's not cookie cutter. It's not. There's. You look at patterns. You look at the statistics. You look at all these different factors, and you try to bring them together for an understanding.
The thing about it, what we've done is a complete automation at this point. We've taken the human. A meteorologist. I love a snowstorm, right? Actually, I don't. I used to. My daughter loves it, right? So meteorologists inherently love bad weather, but so we've taken that emotion, right? You'll hear it right now, right? Oh, it's going to be an epic blizzard winter. You hear that every year. We didn't say that last year. We said way below normal last year. It was way below normal. It was record low,
correct.
Right? So you got to take that emotion out of the scientist, and that's what we've done with automation. So there's, right, it's just math and statistics and cycles. The computer says this based on our, 22 years of studying the science. So again, I think that's an important point, because, meteorologists put their bias into things, and that doesn't work.
So what you've essentially done, Bill, is you are the Billy Bean of weather. You have taken the Moneyball algorithm of taking kind of human judgment out, that famous story of how it takes human judgment out of baseball and really boils down the statistics. And you're doing the same thing with weather. You're letting the statistics speak for themselves.
Yep, and we're not afraid to say it. We're talking about a nor'easter cycle winter for the East Coast, Northeast, us here. Right? I mean, NOAA's not saying that. There's a lot of folks saying, no, there's not going to be a winter this year. We disagree.
So interesting. Let me ask you about, you've hinted at this a little bit. Is that what makes some weather forecasts accurate and some inaccurate? What model they're using? The
good news for us, and even with AI, and you've heard of Google's new AI model, the weather model they have, is that this academic community, again, my professors 30, 40 years ago, were physicists. That's what you are as a meteorologist. And they, as long as they want to stay in that camp, computer models of physics can solve the world's weather problem. We don't think so. Not yet. Maybe one day, but not yet. So we just believe that, God's math says what happened in the past is going to happen in the future. The sun is very cyclic. Tides are cyclic. The moon is cyclic. Right? God gave us this real world scenario of cyclic stuff on Earth. I believe it's a system in balance. Right? There's patterns. Right? So if you understand the past, you can project the future. Right?
So it's really just a matter of kind of where we draw our parameters. Like if you're a physicist, you look for an answer in physics, to your point, and what they're getting is going to be based on that model. So it's not really a human error even, it's just...
We laugh right now with the AI concept. I mean, AI, I say like HI, human intelligence, is better than artificial intelligence, right? And it's got a long way to go.
Right.
I mean, AI, the Google AI model would have told you that there was going to be a Cat 3 hurricane that was going to, Lee, I believe, that was going to destroy New York to Boston, a $50 billion plus storm. It was 394 miles away. Completely wrong, right? So I mean, again, it's got a long way to go.
Sure. And AI artificial intelligence is only as smart as the human
input, right?
Right, exactly.
The good news, we haven't told anybody how we do what we do, so it doesn't have weather trends yet.
Yet, but coming. How long have you guys been doing this modeling with weather trends?
It started with me really in the Air Force 34 years ago as a young lieutenant at MacDill Air Force Base under CENTCOM, but commercially 22 years, so big. Our first client was Walmart, so we're just blessed. God says sometimes a good name can help you, and it helped us because I joke, my next client was, Anheuser-Busch. They asked me, who's your clients? I said, oh, Walmart, let me tell you what they're doing. And signed Anheuser-Busch, and then Johnson & Johnson asked the same question, 22 years ago. Who are your clients? Well, I got Walmart and Anheuser-Busch, and I only had 2 clients. Then I got JP Morgan, right? So it was just kind of this, one name led to many names.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really neat progression. And how have you seen over these last 2 decades, how have you seen this ability, this just change in forecasting? This is really what you've done, is you've introduced a different way to forecast. It has changed these weather models. You guys boast a much higher accuracy. How have you seen that impact the business you work with? We'll talk more about that in the second segment as well. But just how have you seen weather in general move in this direction? Are you hopeful that you think they're going to pick up this new model?
Everybody wants to do this, right? I mean, so if you think about the advantage of what we do statistically in cycles, that also our forecast doesn't change. Whatever I said a year ago for this winter doesn't change because the inputs were based on a year ago. We're looking at cycles today for next December.
Okay.
All right. So our forecast doesn't change. Walmart can go to China today for next fall and buy $80 billion worth of seasonal products with confidence that we're not going to change our forecast. Traditional physics will change twice a month between now and then. Right? So the stability of our forecast, the actionability makes it planning for agriculture and seasonal categories. It's endless what you can do with it.
Do you see this picking up as a more mainstream way of forecasting weather with meteorologists? Or?
Maybe, but no. I mean, there's companies that have, big ones. IBM is one that it admitted they can't do what we do. Because they're still thinking in the physics mindset. Okay. You will never get, you'll maybe 50 to 100 years you might get to where we are, but no, until somebody really thinks. And again, AI has potential if we were to train it, but nobody's training it yet.
Yeah. So at this point in this day and age,
we like where we are.
That's understandable. Bill, thank you for kind of sharing that with us and helping us understand how weather gets forecasted and how you guys do it differently. We're going to go to the break. When we come back, I want to talk about the impact of accurate weather forecasting, how that changes things for your clients. Okay. So don't go away. We'll be right back.
Face the Issues is produced and recorded in the studios of Lighthouse TV. Positively different. Watch Lighthouse TV wherever you go. Available on Roku, Amazon Fire TV, and Apple TV. You can view our in-house studio productions on demand, or watch what's on the station right now with our 24/7 live stream. Search Lighthouse TV online on your streaming device, or go to our website for more information. Visit lighthousetv.org to stay connected. There you can find out what's currently on the air and coming up, how to watch in your area on cable, satellite, broadcast, or streaming devices. Watch past programs or our live stream. Follow us on social media and learn more about the station, our hosts, and our programming. Lighthouse TV, positively different.
Welcome back to Face the Issues. Bill, thank you again for joining us today. I want to pivot our conversation from how we forecast the weather to the impact that has. Now, when we let off, I kind of made that joke about, we all remember, your baseball game gets rained out and they're like, hey, they said it was supposed to be a sunny day, what happened? Right. But from the work that you guys do, the impact's a lot more than just the picnic gets rained out or a game gets rained out. You guys work with retail, small businesses and large businesses, agriculture, medicine, finance, local governments, entertainment industry, across the board. Let's kind of walk through some of these. What's probably the biggest impact you've seen on how accurately forecasting this weather a year out affects some of your clients?
The fundamental thing, and again, I'll talk about this later, is a walk with Schwarzkopf changed our mindset of give me an answer, you're the scientist, I don't want to hedge, give me an answer, and don't change your mind. That immediately 34 years ago, it's like, how do I do that? I got to dump physics and think a different way. The advantage of that conversation 34 years ago really set us on the path we are today. That because we don't change our minds, we give highly accurate, 85% accurate forecasts that are then tied to an outcome, right? We predict bottled water sales, beer sales, Coke sales, you name it, shorts, sandals, flip, whatever, right? We predict 10,000 things that you buy, so you can plan inventory, right? If you know this, winter is going to be very cold and snowy, well, cold, not cold, snowy on the East Coast, right? And it's up 400%, you'll have 400% more snow blowers in February. Okay. So the ability to have inventory in the right spots, California may not be the snowy spot this year. So putting all your inventory out there like you had last year, you needed it. This year, you don't need it. as much. So the ability to plan big business
Sure.
decisions is what our technology allows folks to do.
And for those large businesses, I mean, I imagine then a lot of their inventory and where they move things is actually based on what they believe is going to happen.
Most of our clients will take a good chunk. We always say bet the farm, don't bet the farm, right? Bet the pig, the horse, right? So they'll take, Anheuser-Busch, for example, will take about a third of what we say. So we say beer sales will be up 6% in a given month in the future. They'll plan up 2%, right? So that's how they'll plan their business. So they minimize. Now, sometimes they'll say, we wish we had taken your full guidance because it's about 85% right. So that's the smart way to do it. But again, when they just make small, 2, 3, 4, 5% changes, it's billions of dollars in theory. So when you're working with the big guys, now I say we're 85%. We are going to miss an area. Now we typically we do it by day, by week, a year out. So it's not a month. So we will miss a week in a month, or a week in every 5-6 weeks. So I always joke. We were on ABC 2020, with Sam Champion years ago, and we had about 10,000 brides call in, because they're like, can you tell me my weather for my wedding? The problem is, I joke with that, we're going to make 15% of those bridezillas, and 85% will love us.
Yeah.
So you're going to miss an area every now and then.
Right.
So when you're working with a big multinational company, if I miss 15% of Target stores, they don't care. You crushed it over here. I made hundreds of millions with your forecast.
That makes sense. The 50% loss, you essentially can write off by how well you did elsewhere.
So again, that carry, if you're a farmer, then they may not be so happy with your forecast, So.
But you do a lot of work with agriculture as well. How does this kind of shift the agricultural world and how they choose to farm or take products to the market and so forth?
So our challenge is, again, small 15-person company, right? How do we're completely automated so we can do things very quickly. Like guys and gals in our office right now are giving sales forecasts for our big clients for next summer, fall.
Okay.
Right. So they're already delivering that completely automated. Check it. Yep. QC. Good. Out the door. We built some automated processes for farmers, right? So how can I give this intelligence to a farmer that is right here in Nazareth or Bethlehem or Allentown, right? But how do I do that where it's cost effective, right? I can't talk to hundreds of farmers.
Right.
We work with hundreds of them. So it's an automated solution. They get their forecast for their farm field a year out. It's called Farmcast. So that's the challenge. This is a small company. How can I scale this to every Rita's Italian Ice? I've helped them years ago, right? If it rains, nobody buys their product.
Right.
Dutch Springs, right? If it rains, nobody goes to the water park. So again, how can we help on a broader scale? And that's the challenge for us right now: is where do we go to scale and help those folks?
So I imagine it's easier then when you're talking about a large company or a company that's national or international, where they have stores all across the country. If you're just in one area, say you've got a farm in the Slate Belt region of Pennsylvania, then you really that's the only place that farmer cares about.
Yeah, it still works. I mean, again, the accuracy is down to location. We track it for 32 million spots on Earth, so we never hide behind what we say. It is statistics. It's going to be wrong. It's going to be right. But if it's more right than it's wrong. On average, it's more accurate than a week 2 short-range physics-based forecast.
Sure.
Everywhere. In fact, where people tend to live, in the Shanghais and New Yorks, near waters, we're off by about a degree or 2. I already told you, day 1 forecast is off by 3 degrees.
Right.
So it's really accurate in that regard. So yeah, we can still help a farmer. Like I said, if I have 300 of them across the country, unfortunately 15% might say you're off. But then the next year you're right in that area.
Yeah.
And the next year you're right. The next year you're right.
So the longer you go, the more long-term it is, the more effective and beneficial.
And farmers, again, they're kind of my passion of mine because, again, their whole livelihoods depend on it, right? I mean, you get a drought year like they had a couple years ago, great, corn prices are $8.50, but my crop's dead. I don't even have a crop. I wish I could sell it at $8.50. I can't.
Right.
And now they've had a better crop, and now prices are at $4, $4.50, right? So it's, okay, I got product this year, but at half the price, that I'm getting.
Yeah. 2 of the areas that intrigued me when I was looking at the work that your group does are the medical world and the finance world. Start with the medical world. How does the accuracy of a weather forecast, especially a year out, impact how we do healthcare?
Well, so again, it's we help with asthma, a couple of diseases: asthma, allergy, flu to an extent. Okay. So last year, what happened with flu, right? So it's flu you can kind of predict outbreaks based on what happens in Australia. They're 6 months ahead, right? So kind of what happens in Australia's winter will be kind of a bellwether for our winter. Now, the reality is that you need to have a really cold surge of weather in the fall when kids go back to school in the South. Flu in the South starts in like Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama. It's kind of where the flu starts. So if they get a really cold snap early in like September, as they did last year, not this year, flu went crazy epic early because cold, the flu virus survives longer. Okay. It's like this, right? It's a spiky protein. It keeps its viability in cold weather versus hot, humid weather. flu's around all year round, but if it's humid, it swells.
Okay.
Like COVID. COVID is the same thing, as we've come to learn. And we said when COVID, we know pollen looks like this. COVID looks like this. Flu looks like this, right? So these proteins, right? When it swells in humidity and heat, it's not going to attach to you and get you sick.
Right.
So if you can, this year, for example, in the South, has been really hot. Hottest in 10 years. Some places the hottest in 30 years. The flu is much slower starting this year than last year. Right? So if you can get that weather right, you can predict these diseases. Asthma and allergy are easy. If it's hot and dry in spring, you're going to have pollen. You're going to have allergies. If it's hot and dry in the fall, you're going to have ragweed allergy and asthma suffering. Now, asthma can also be cold, really cold winter.
Right.
So when a cold outbreak, asthma suffering can go crazy. So if you can predict the weather, you can predict these disease outcomes.
So when you look at something like that, you said it was hotter in the South this year, and so the flu didn't have as quick a start. In the Northeast, you guys are looking at a colder winter. Does that mean the flu could kick up here?
So what happens with flu, though, is more of the onset. Once it goes viral, there's no weather. There is to an extent, but once it goes viral, spread, then it's not a weather play. It's just that we've got a lot of 10 million sick humans and spreading it that way. The reality is if you slow the start of it, as we've done this year, you're going to have kind of a domey season. And we'll probably peak. Last year we peaked at Thanksgiving, off the scale. Worst in 20 some years. This year we're down about 50%. So it's still there's still some flu out there.
Of course.
Just half of what, and exactly what Australia did. Australia had an epic season 2 years ago, half of what they had this year.
Interesting.
Part of it's that you also had type A flu last year. Everybody got it. You still have immunity a little bit to this year. Right? So, the weather helped. The immunity from last year helped, so again, anyway, that's how you can predict.
Same question on the finance end. I mean, I spent years as a financial advisor, but how does weather impact that industry, and how do you guys help them understand their markets?
We have, you name the bank, we have them, right? JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, and Bank of America. We work with all the, at least several dozen banks. More on the retail equity side, right? Understand, if you've had this so last year, this period, the fall last year here in Allentown, for example, was the coldest in a decade, right? It was great for its target. Coats, gloves, mittens, you had to buy it. It was cold. And this year, it didn't get cold until Black Friday. It was the warmest in, So that change had a huge negative influence on seasonal sales. If you know that for Wall Street, you can predict, hey, Target and is not going to do as good. Home Depot's not going to do as good this year. The clients just aren't going to do in this kind of weather. So we actually help them predict kind of the equity performance. So if it's hot and dry through winter, you'd be long on Home Depot. If it's hot and dry, you think it'll go to Macy's, right? Coat sales are not going to be good in a hot, dry environment. So again, that's how we help them understand who's going to overperform in the year ahead, who underperforms week by week, month by month, quarter by quarter.
Yeah, so interesting. Last question of this segment to you, Bill. For everyday people in the community, I mean, obviously they're not necessarily clients. I mean, they're you have these big industries who are. How should they? Is there a way they should think about weather differently? I mean, how should they think about weather, knowing now that forecast a week out may not mean much?
We're all about proactive planning. We actually have a free app. It's WT360 Lite. It's a free app on Samsung and Google, but it helps you kind of get a sense of why be shocked about your vacation, right? I mean, if you can pick a hot, dry period, which we're good at, that's a good week to go on vacation. Right? If it's cold, wet, maybe you don't want to go on that vacation. So anyway, just ways to help the end user, for free.
And what's that app again?
WT360 Lite or 360 Pro with no ads.
So WT360. That's great. Bill, thank you again. When we come back, talk a little bit about how you got into all of this. And so don't go away. We'll be right back.
Watch Lighthouse TV wherever you go. Available on Roku, Amazon Fire TV, and Apple TV. You can view our in-house studio productions on demand, or watch what's on the station right now with our 24/7 live stream. Search Lighthouse TV online on your streaming device, or go to our website lighthousetv.org for more information. Lighthouse TV, positively different. Face the Issues is produced and recorded in the studios of Lighthouse TV. Positively different.
Welcome back to Face the Issues. Bill, thank you again for joining us and just for really breaking down, I think, what a lot of us don't realize is as complicated an issue as it is. I want to ask you, I mean, this last segment, we always like to get to know our guests a little bit better. And I want to ask you about how you got into this. I mean, you are a retired captain from the U.S. Air Force. We've joked in our emails about being Captain Kirk, the real Captain Kirk, here in the flesh. But how did you get into doing weather? And I believe you've mentioned your story kind of goes through your time in the Air Force.
Yeah. Well, a kid growing up in Hawaii, we had this big cone of low like they're having today in Hawaii, and it was a 100-inch rainstorm in a week. So it's like, imagine Sandy, Hurricane Sandy, but for a week. That's what it is. So as a kid, that got me really interested in weather. I actually thought I was going to be a minister. Thought I applied to Wheaton. I thought I was going to be this minister. And I said, God will put a roadblock in your path if that's not what he wants you to do. I probably wouldn't have been that great of a minister. But I was a good weather guy. I liked science. And on that trip, we found out that I had a long-lost cousin at Rutgers that was a chief or state climatologist. Oh, wow. And that's how I became. And then my stepdad said, hey, the Air Force needs meteorologists. And joined the Air Force, and my first, again, God put someone else in my life, MacDill Air Force Base, CENTCOM, General Schwarzkopf. I said, if you're under 35, you don't know who he was. Desert Storm, but had a 10-minute walk with Schwarzkopf, and he's the one who said, give me an answer, not a hedge, and don't change your mind. Yeah. You're a scientist, give me an answer, not a hedge. I want to plan important things with what you're telling me. And that's not physics, right? That's not meteorology. And that 10-minute walk totally changed us on the trajectory of what we are today. And now it's given us the ability to be kind of a kingdom building organization, right? We have the ability to do a lot of good financially. I can't necessarily at church be the greeter, but I might be able to help them financially. Yeah. Right? So I just think that was God's way of putting people in my path, sometimes for a season, sometimes for 10 minutes. To set you on the right trajectory, that he wanted you to use your passion. Yeah. Let me ask you about that. I mean, I think a lot of people, you said you wanted to be a minister, and then you said God put a roadblock in. You talked about this 10-minute walk with your commanding officer that changed the trajectory of your life. When you hear, I mean, people who watch the show or young people that you might talk to who they think that I want to do this, and then suddenly plans change, what advice do you give them when they're in the midst of that kind of sharp left turn or right turn in life? Be open-minded about it. I mean, again, if you're a Christian believer, right, Jesus follower, you're going to say he's going to keep you on your path, right? He knows what's best, right, for your trajectory. And even when I met the colonel at the Air Force ROTC, I had long 80s Sean Cassidy hair, right? He said, you need a haircut, young man. And I'm like, okay. But I was, my path could have said, let's run, Forrest, run, but I didn't run, shaved off my hair. But again, God will put someone in your path. He will steer you toward your passion. He invented you to do what you're good at, and listen. Try to listen, and when there's a roadblock, maybe God's telling you something there. Yeah. So. Last question, Bill. When you think about the future, what do you think the future is for you, for the company, for weather? Yeah, look, with this whole AI craze and whatnot, I think we're in a good spot. 22 years, long time to get here, but I think we're in a right spot that some entity will believe in what we do. We've proved it for 22 years. And that we can then, another chapter. And that's just my path. I don't know. My path says I'd love to help, be this kingdom building organization that can help Word FM, Bethlehem Christian School, these charities that I want to help. So I don't know. We'll see. In the meantime, I keep, charging along here, and trying to sell year-ahead weather. Absolutely. Stay on the path that God's paved for you. Yeah. Bill, thank you so much for joining us, for the work that you do, and for really just helping us understand this topic better. Awesome. Thank you for having us. Yeah. That is our show for today. I want to thank my guest, Bill Kirk from Weather Trends International. And of course, I want to thank each of you for tuning in as well. And we hope to see you again right back here next week. My name is Sam Chen. On behalf of all of us here at Face the Issues, thank you and good night.